I'm going to show you my actual finished mannequin here. So this is the completed one that we just finished it, just got it styled, ready for you all to see. But you can see the tones that we've created in here. We're going to talk a lot about that, how to create these really pretty blush rose tones, especially to complement like the really nice chocolate tone that we've got naturally in here. And this is the before, right? So this is what we started with. You can see that it's quite dark, right? It's the same base on both sides, but you can definitely see the difference in the dimension of the ends. Pretty flat, not a lot going on here, whereas we've got these really pretty blush, warm rose tones in there. So we're gonna talk all about that, how to create that, start to finish. We're talking about how to formulate properly, how to section it properly, and then the actual application as well. Right.
And really quick, we have a lot of people saying hello from the Joico family.
What's up, guys?
There's a good crowd watching, so thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, and we're all super excited too, coming off of, we just wrapped up our JoyCon 2021, which is something that we as educators do every year. In the Joico family, it's a global event. We did it virtually this year, and it was really, really great. So we're all pretty hyped off of that right now. I'm still riding the high, even in this class. So you're going to get the best version of me here. I have this for two reasons. First, this is our sectioning, right? So let's get right into that part. We've got our sectioning here, and I couldn't try to make it any easier than this. Now, this is a 2D image. It's not a 3D head. So I had to curve my lines a little bit more here so that you would get the effect. But essentially, all we're doing is taking a slightly diagonal back, and here we've got the live model. We've got a slightly diagonal back section that starts at the temple area, and you're going to go down to well below the occipital, right, into the nape area. So first thing you'll do, divide it down the center radial parting, or you can go off the parting, right? If someone's got off to the side, then you would just take it from there and adjust back over to the center as you get to the back. But we're going to take that, and then you're going to take that first section going down across, clip that away. The next one, you're gonna go just above that hairline, right? So let's say we're gonna go about an inch, right? Does that look like an inch to y'all? Mm-hmm. I hope so. All right, so about an inch from there, and same thing, we're gonna carry that diagonal back, and this is gonna come to just above the occipital. So from below to above, this is where we're gonna separate these two, and that you've got that line right there. And then finally you have the remaining top section here. So this is what she looks like from the front. I think it's also, this would work really great for Coachella, if you felt like going to that, right? If you needed a style idea, this is like a reverse Rey from Star Wars, but more on the sideways versus the front to back. Just have a little fun with it, right? But here is another good visual. I feel like in the back you could really see those sections a little bit more in the way they kind of line up. And if you do it this way, if you can do the little Zulu knots, it's visually more appealing for your clients. Or if you're doing a class and you're kind of doing something like this as well. So we'll put her back over here. She's good to go. And then within those sections, right? So as we're working through, we're just gonna take these diagonal back panels. We're just gonna work within these really large panels here. So the first one's gonna be like this, and then the next one goes here. So we'll end up with 1, 2, 3. And then the same thing, we're gonna come from just behind the hairline here, right? We're gonna incorporate this top portion into the section we're working on. We're gonna go about here and then about here as well, right? So breaking that up into almost equal sections. And what you'll find is that they tend to slightly lay over themselves, right? So this section will slightly lay over this section, and the same thing with these over these. They all kind of coincide. The reason for that, and the reason I wanted to do it that way, is because if you're following the curve of the head, even though on a linear plane they line up, because of the curve of the head and the way that the hair falls, also you factor in those things like the growth direction of the hair, where is it going to go, it tends to just slightly offset it to where when it lays down it has a really nice natural flow. So you have parts that fall up higher, other parts that sit lower, but then just below that you have these panels that fill in those gaps right in there, right? So that's what we want. We want to have that depth and contrast behind the light, And then that's going to help to brighten up these front panels here, just like this is working underneath to do the same thing there as well. So we're getting a lot of depth, a lot of contrast, and really simple, minimal effort, okay? Now, before we actually get started on this, I think it's really important to talk about the term rose brown or chocolate blush balayage, right? It's a trending word right now. A lot of people are coming in, they're asking for it. They're like, oh, I saw this picture, I really want to do this, but and all has a different opinion. Everyone has a different perspective on what rose brown really is. For example, I went into Google and I typed in rose brown hair, right? And look at all the different versions of rose brown that we're looking at. I mean, if you're looking with me, you have, well, I went straight to their page. Hold on. Okay. So if you're looking with me, we've got something that looks a little bit more on like it's more of a pink hue, I guess, you know? And then you have some that actually sit more natural. This is much, much lighter, right? Versus these over here, right? And this almost has like a coppery feel to it, especially towards the ends right here. So I think it's really important to identify what would you consider rose brown. I have one right here on my personal Instagram page, right? Where if you scroll down.
P.S. If you're not following Ricardo on Instagram, please do. It's at Stylist Ricardo Santiago. And if you're on Clubhouse, please connect with us there as well at Stylist Ricardo S.
There you go.
And TikTok, same thing.
So here's one that I would consider kind of a rose brown, right? She's not quite as dark or as much of a rich brown at the base. We actually worked with her natural base, but definitely have those kind of soft pink rose hues, a little mauve-y in there. And that's just part of the whole perspective of it, right? So she was a great example of someone who came in who said, use those terms, right? The blush balayage, a little bit of a rose brown, and we had different ideas of what that actually was. So I had to ask her, hey, can you show me a picture of what you see versus what I'm thinking that you're saying, you know? So that's where we've got that right here. So couple quick tips here. This is great to take a screenshot. We're talking about rose brown hair, tri-panel balayage. Super simple sectioning. It's quick and efficient, right? Maximum impact. So maximum impact for minimal effort, right? When we're talking about that quickness and efficiency. Customizable, totally customizable. You can adjust the formulas however you want. You don't even have to do it with Lightener. You can do it with permanent colors if you wanted to. And also a very trending palette when we're talking about rose brown hair. Later on, we're going to get into the formulations that I've got mixed up here, but first, let's get right into the hair. So, my preferred method of application with this is actually more of a wet style balayage. All right, and the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm using Joico's Blonde Life Cream Lightener.
And who has had questions about how to use this product for your balayage? Yes. Raise your hands if that is you.
Or if you've used this for balayage, also put that in there as well. Say, hey, I've tried that, and then let me know how you liked it. You know, we'd love to get the feedback on that. So I mix mine to a different consistency based on how I'm going to be applying, right? In this case, because I'm going with more of a wet balayage, I actually formulate 1 to 1.5. So I already have that mixed up here. Got 1 part my cream lightener and 1.5 parts of my developer. Okay, so with the developer, I would like to whisk it up. Make sure that you're using a whisk that has silicone on it instead of metal, because we don't want it to create any kind of reaction. And also something that I think is important to point out, the reason that I waited to mix this live is because I want you all to see the consistency here, right? You see how it looks like really loose? It's almost like I don't know, like a really wet frosting. Like it's not quite there, right? Like you want to add a little bit more sugar or cornstarch in there to thicken it up. But this is where it's an important note when you're using this. Don't go straight in just yet, right? Give this a second. I'm going to put this down and give it a minute or so to kind of marinate there for a second. And what it's going to do is it's going to start to thicken up, right? So as that's thickening up, I'm going to get my brush ready, and I'm going to section the hair first. It's still a little bit dry, so let me just dampen it down. Hopefully this doesn't mess up my style on the other side.
So a few people have mentioned that they've never used it before, but they would love to. So this is a great quick course on how to use it one way.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I know, a lot of people felt like there was a void that was left because we don't have a clay lightener anymore, and they're like, oh, what am I going to use to balayage? This is your best tool for that now. So definitely get your hands on it. Start playing with it a little bit. Works great in a foil. But I really think that you're going to love using it as a balayage lightener as well.
And Ricardo did prep the hair with Joico's Defy Damage beforehand. If you have any questions about that, there's a lot of information you get on the website or previous education as well. So always prep the hair with Joico Defy Damage.
And just to give you a visual, if you haven't used this before, the way that we use this, I put it on dry, and so I didn't want to show it because it was already on there. But the way that we would do this, you want to give it a good shake, and then you're just going to take sections, small sections like that, and you're going to do short bursts down the length of the hair. So shake it first, short bursts like that, right? It only takes a couple of sprays for each section, and then just keep working through. Shake it before every application, put it through. That's going to just add that extra layer of protection into the hair. Once you've sprayed it all throughout the hair, then go through and just brush it. You can either comb it out, or I like to use like a detangling brush or a combo brush. If you have one with 4 bristles, is ideal because it really spreads that product more evenly, right?
And for those asking for the formulations, those will be posted in the comments section as well as on the afters and so forth. So please just continue to watch along. If you're just joining and this is of interest to you or someone you know, please don't hesitate to share it on your feed as well. And Ricardo is doing a giveaway today with Joico, so engagement is the name of the game. So ask your questions, put down some emojis. If you like this, let us know in the comments. That will enter you in.
I'm going to clip her other half just out of the way here. And that's already done. We don't want to do that again. And let's start with our first section, right? So we're going to go from that temple area, like I said, and we're just going to work diagonally back to just below the occipital, right? In this case, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to work from the back to the front. And what I like to do, and this is just an easy tip that you can do when sectioning, is if you put your finger where you're working towards, then it makes it a lot easier when you're trying to draw your line. Your body just kind of has like this mind-muscle connection, and it automatically takes you to that spot. And it makes sectioning so much easier to do that versus trying to kind of like wiggle your way through there and get it just right. Okay, so let's clip this one up.
Oh, Gail says, thanks for sharing your time and educating everyone today.
Oh, my pleasure. I was honestly pretty excited coming off, like I said, coming off of JoyCon. We had such an amazing time, and we did a really cool class. I got to do a collaborative class with my friend Joe Buck over at 901, and it was nice to do that, and now it's really nice to come on and do something new all over again. Just kind of keeps those creative juices flowing.
Can you just repeat that tip that you're talking about with the hand?
Yeah, so I'm going to do it again here. But what I wanted to do was turn the mannequin more so you could see where we're coming from.
Great.
So you're going to go here. Let's find our occipital here. We're going to go just above that. And then you're going to connect. So you see, I put my finger down where I want that section to be, which is about an inch back from the hairline. And I'm just going to let the tip of the comb find its way to my finger, which it always does. And try not to pierce your glove like I just did. All right, and then there we go. Nice clean section. And now I can go ahead and clip this up and away. But what's important to do this, the reason why I'm going and using these reference points of like the occipital versus the crown is because I wanted to make sure that I'm keeping this top section individual. Like I want this to be separate from the other two in relation to where it lays. And that's because if you look at the section itself, this is the majority of what we see through the top. This is gonna, as this falls, this covers all of this, front and back, right? So that's where this is going to fall. So I wanna make sure that this is all cohesive here. And then this part, what's most important, I would say, about these two sections that I'm gonna work through next are these front panels right here, right? Because this is your top surface that everyone's gonna see, and then these front panels are your first pieces that anyone sees on anyone. So one of the notes that we tried to really drill in our class yesterday and throughout the last couple weeks, you know, and Joe kept referencing it, is that that face is what everyone sees first. So you have to make sure that you get that part right.
Connie has a question. She asks, thank you so much for all your, oh, hold on 1 second. Oh, she's thanking you. And then the question is coming from Lisa. She says, doesn't the fact that you have wet it down slow the lightening process?
So yes, which is why we're doing it this way, right? Because, and that's a great point. I'm really glad that you asked that about the water and the lightener. So I'm purposely doing that because cream lightener gives me 9+ levels of lift. I don't want 9+ levels of lift, right? And I'm using 20 volume. So what I want to do is control it a little bit more, reduce that lift, but almost use the water as like a little bit of a buffer, you know? And what else it's doing is it's giving me a little bit more slip. So as I'm working through and I'm doing my balayage work, it's going to offer more of a control factor to create a softer blend versus if I was just going in dry painting with it. If I was doing it on dry air, I would change my formulation and I'd probably go more 1:1 versus 1 to 1.5, right? But you can see here now, you see how much stiffer that is? So give that a couple of minutes. You know, it doesn't take long. I just did that sectioning, which is really quick sectioning. And now my lightener is at a perfect consistency for me to work with.
And Ricardo doesn't want to lift to the highest level because we are in essence celebrating brunette and utilizing the warm tones and the depth of her hair, not eliminating it completely.
Exactly. The name of the game, it's not always about blonde them out and then fill it back in with a tone later. Use those underlying pigments to your advantage, right? So that's what I'm doing here, is because I know that I'm staying within that level, we'll say 7, 8 that she's probably going to lift to. That's perfect. What does a 7, 8 lift us to? Can anybody throw out what your underlying pigment is going to be when you lift up to a level 7, 8?
So if you have that answer, drop it in the comments box. There is a slight delay, so give us a second and we will address those answers that are coming in. Emily does agree that warm is so in right now. That's right. Someone asked if you could do this as a smoky tone or would it turn purple? I think that's a really great question, whereas we talk about rose and rosy tones.
Yeah, so as we're talking about, you know, those different kinds of tones and stuff, what do we know about if we want to make it more on the smoky side?
Hold that thought if you would.
Oh,
folks are answering. We have answers coming in that are orange, red orange, and copper. What would happen?
All right, perfect. So yes, if we're lifting to a level 7, 8, that's going to put us right around here, right? So as we get lighter, right, so we'll say our strongest underlying pigment, this is probably like a level 5, we're gonna live in this red. As we start getting lighter, you could say maybe a 6, 7, 8, 9 to 10, as we're starting to get more into that yellow, orange yellow, right? So maybe a 9's over here, 10's right here. So we're probably living anywhere from our red orange to yellow orange, right? So with that, what would you all suggest would be your best tone or best one color? If you can pick just one tonal color to put over a red, orange, or yellow orange to create a pink rose tone, what would you use?
Okay, so that's another opportunity to enter yourself in to win the giveaway by dropping an answer in the comments section.
I didn't know you were signing up for trivia today, did you?
It's interactive. So, and while folks type in their answers, hopefully, can you just really quick show how wet you have the hair?
Yeah, so it's not soaked, and this is an important note too. Is I don't want it to be soaked, but I do want the moisture to be consistent. So it's just slightly damp. Right, easy for me to work on, but not enough that it's going to transfer water onto my glove.
Or drip.
Right.
Okay, so we have some answers coming in. Thank you for answering that. Stephanie says yellow, orange. Lisa says blue.
Blue, all right.
And
okay. So, great answers, right? So let's look at, if we were over here and we put on blue, then what's going to end up happening? If we're living in orange and we put on blue, or if we're within red, orange, or yellow, orange, that's more than likely going to end up canceling us out. We're going to meet in the middle. If we put on more red or orange, we're going to stay in that family. But if we're over here, then what we want to do is try to add in something that's going to pull it more over this way, but not without canceling it out. So we need to stay more in this purple family, and you need to pick a tone that's on level with that in order to work with the level and underlying pigment, and that's going to pull you more towards the pink.
So the correct answer is
more of a violet.
Exactly. So we had a couple answers coming in that did include purple.
Awesome.
And Nadia says her favorite rose tone is violet with a touch of red.
Yeah, see, that's perfect. See, I think that it's like a mauve-y rose, right? It's such a pretty word to say, mauve, right? You guys should just practice that. Mauve.
Okay, so let's go into your application, and maybe you can share a little bit about what tools you're using as well.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that I'm using something that's going to really drive that product in. So we're really working those ends. We're getting the ends really kind of tipped out and lightened out here. And then from this, then we're going to work our way up to soften that line, and that's where the water comes into play. It's going to soften it in just that much more. And what I'm going to do is more of like a back feathering technique here. Continuing it, I'm just working my way up. As I'm doing that, I'm helping to resaturate, but I'm lightening my the pressure that I'm applying. Right, so down here, I'm holding this tightly, and I was working that color in. I've got a lot of pressure as I'm making sure that I get that saturated really well. But as I'm coming up, you'll notice that I'm getting more gentle on my grip, and I'm actually blurring that color out with my hands as well. So just as much as I'm softening it up here with the brush, I'm also doing the same thing with my hands to blur that line out, okay? And then when I get to this front hairline, I'm just gonna tap around here, right?
And what type of brush would you recommend? Or do you?
You know, I just say work with what you're comfortable with. So I really love this power painter that I'm using here for balayage or painting work, but I find that I find it a lot easier to just use like a feather bristle brush. It holds that lightener in there really well, and it's really gentle as it works through the hair. It just makes it really easy. So I like that one, and let me grab one of my favorites, or just like, you know, a good old-fashioned feather bristle brush. Not so much like your firmer bristle brushes. That's not going to give you that same, it's not going to hold the product same, and it doesn't spread it as well, you know? Just for painting, that's my personal preference.
Awesome. As you do that, we have a question coming in from Kistia. I like your name. She says, so newbie question here. How would you do this as well as needing to redo the roots and top part of the second zone? Okay,
so that's a great question. When we're talking about how to incorporate this with a secondary tone and applying a base formula, it's going to be ideal that you use something that's probably more demi-permanent versus permanent, right? So what I did is I actually didn't have like a good brunette mannequin, so I had to make one. So I based the whole thing using 6NG and 7NWB. I'm sorry, not NWB, just NW, from our DD Cream Demi-Permanent series. So those are not permanent, and what that does is that gives me a nice even palette to start with, and then I'm able to build on top of that, okay? But if you are trying to do both at once, then what you can do is you can still kind of apply your base first and shadow that down, really stretching that color down and through. You can see how far I'm going up with the lightener, that if you were to stretch your formula down, I would still take it, just apply through the base and take your sections the same exact way that we're working here. And just apply from the back end of that section as you're stretching it. Start saturating it like this. Stand in the front, over directing forward, and stretch that color forward. Then use your hands to soften that color out, and it'll blur in. Don't go all the way to the ends. Blur it in, right, until it runs dry, and then go through into your balayage. Because when your balayage overlaps, particularly over a Deming, it'll create actually a nice soft, kind of a blurred out transition area that looks really nice too.
I hope that answers your question.
I hope I didn't like overcomplicate that.
Cameron says she always uses lightener on dry hair. Looking forward to trying this on wet hair.
Awesome.
We had a couple other ones that rolled in. So what developer are you using? On the mannequin, Ricardo is using...
So this is, I'm still using, you want to go between like, if you're using this on a mannequin, you need to be a little bit more aggressive. So like between, I'd say like maybe 30 volume is probably your good number. But if you're doing this on a person, you don't need to go any higher than 20, right? Because again, cream lightener is very strong. You don't need to go very, very aggressive with it. Now, something that another like kind of pro tip that you can use too is, you see how we've got the lightener kind of built up right in here? So what I like to do is just go in with my hands and just soften that in like this. And you see what that did was it took all those little spots and just blurred them away, right? So that's going to create a really nice soft transition right there. And then you do the same thing on the top, and then just let it fall.
And Nadia, to answer your question, she asks, would clay lightener be ideal? This is in replacement of clay lightener.
Yeah, so we're using the cream lightener instead of clay lightener because we don't have a clay lightener anymore. So this is a great alternative, and I think one that probably gets underutilized in the salon.
And Dan, thank you for answering a couple questions here. Nadia, you're correct. We are not aiming for 9 levels of lift. What color are you using? You'll be able to see all formulas in the comments and as well as on the afters when they're posted.
Yeah, and the other thing too, y'all, is as we're working further in, I'm going to go through a whole step-by-step where we're talking about the different levels that we're going to be working within and what is the ideal rose brown combination tones within those levels. Right, so we're going to talk about that a little bit later once we get through the technique itself. But for now, we're just working through this technique. Now here, this part I'm going to leave totally up to you as an artist. You get to choose. Do you want to brighten it up all the way underneath at the base? If so, I would recommend elevating and drop that lightener down this way. Or do you want to keep it more just through the ends? Personally, I'm going to keep it focused more just through the ends. I'm finding that more and more clients are kind of going towards a more low maintenance approach. And that means that we don't necessarily want to take it all the way up all the time, right? Now, there'll be times when we want to break that line up and they want to change it up. But in this situation, we're just going to focus more so through those mids and ends and just have a couple of higher points in the front of your section. That's gonna create what we were showing before on the other side here, how when it falls, it staggers and you're creating brightness and depth and brightness and depth, and they line up perfectly.
And of course, you would want to consult with your client on that, of course.
Yeah, now this is all totally based off consultation, right? Number one most important thing that we're going to do is consult with our clients. Again, that's why I brought up the reference using the computer, showing the pictures, saying, is this your idea of a rose brown or is this your idea? And then once you figure that out, then you figure out your placement. So get your tone first, then figure out your placement.
Awesome. So now Ricardo's going into section 2. And Haley, yes, this will be available for rewatching as well as sharing and telling your friends about it. What's the benefit of damp hair with lightener? We did cover that already, Natalie.
But we'll just say it again anyway, because
why not?
Why not? Yep. So the damp hair is just making it a lot easier to maneuver the product through the hair, and it creates a little bit more slip on the surface, right? So you can spread it without having to worry about creating any kind of chunky lines. It softens in much nicer than if it was on dry hair. You do lose some of the potency of the product itself, but still works really well, particularly when you're only trying to create a few levels of lift. Of course, I run out of water while I'm on the live. Oh, no, good, just a bad angle.
We have another question coming. We kind of covered this one a little bit too, but great question. Alyssa asks, would you recommend using a powder lightener when doing a balayage technique, or always a clay or cream lightener?
You know, I would say I think it's a preference thing. It's totally a preference thing. I know some people who are like religious about which lightener they use for each type of application. I personally like to mix it up. Sometimes I like to use a cream, sometimes I like to use a powder. I think more than anything is it comes down to the consistency that you're comfortable with and which one's going to get you that consistency better. So the cream I think tends to be a little softer, a little easier to maneuver, but the powder, you can get it to be a little thicker. So maybe you want like a solid placement somewhere, you're creating really sharp lines with your balayage, probably want to go with the powder instead. You know, I think clay lighteners are great, but they're almost like your safety net when you're doing balayage. They make it really easy, but you don't get quite as much lift, versus if you were to use a powder or a cream lightener, then you can get all that lift that you need.
And you get a lot more mess with clay lightener.
Yeah, you get the powder everywhere, you know? Okay, so again, look, we're saturating these ends really, really well. Working more on a side-to-side motion. And then I'm just gonna, you see how I'm already starting to, how that line is starting to blur itself out just by doing that. And as I'm working my way up, again, I'm using kind of between my pinky and ring finger here. And I'm starting with good pressure down here, and as I'm working my way up, I soften that pressure. And that's going to help to blur that line out as well.
Two questions. Do you recommend doing the haircut first with this as well? And the next question is, it looks like you're over-directing. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Absolutely. Great. Both absolutely great questions. So first one, haircut. Yes, I would probably cut it first. If you go in and, like, let's just say I decided to give this girl a shag when we were done, I'm going to cut out like 80% of what I just did. So if you're going to be doing any kind of layering or anything like that, I highly recommend just going through, doing your haircut first. Plus you save on product as well. There's no sense on formulating a bunch of stuff that you're going to end up cutting away. Okay, so that I agree. Do the haircut first. The other question escapes my mind.
The other question was body position and over directing.
Yes, all right, cool. So yes, I am over directing because I'm working particularly this panel right here. So I'm going to over direct this way because I want a flatter surface for this high point right here. And that's really important too when you're doing balayage. You need to make sure that you're keeping consistent tension as you work through, and in order to do that you need to change your body position accordingly, right? So in some cases I can stand directly in front, so if I was focusing right here I would be directly in front because that gives me the most tension right there. But look what happens when I pull here is it gives me sag on the front, and it also sags in the back. So make sure that your body position falls in according to where you want your tension to be. So I wanted my tension in the front, so I pull it to the back to create that tension in the front.
Awesome.
But I'm really glad that you asked that because I feel like body positioning for me is such like a major talking point. So I tend to nerd out on that.
And Shauna asks, so to confirm, she asks, do you make sure the bottom is saturated?
Yes. Yeah.
For this look, yes.
We are. If you can see here on the after, I'm just going to give her a quick spin. You can see here on the after that all of the ends are lightened. So we've got that definitely saturated well all through the ends. And then as we come up, that's where our lines start to soften in a little bit. And we could have left this straight and you still would have seen the way that those colors transition like that. I'm actually going to ruin this style and comb it. But look, if I pull this tight and straight, you can see still how good saturation through here, but then we start to soften it up as it goes in here, and it just really just blurs into that natural dark base, right? So it completely blurs out to where you don't have any lines coming in.
Awesome.
Yeah, look, it's still pretty.
So great questions coming in. Again, remember those questions enter you in for a really generous giveaway from Joico, so make sure you keep on engaging.
Absolutely. So, y'all, we're like halfway done already, and I'm like stopping and talking so I can slow myself down in order to do this in the appropriate amount of time. So we're already halfway through. We only have 5 more panels to go. We've already done 4 of them, and the rest of these, they just get easier and easier. So now as we're working into this interior section here, I'm actually going to stand directly in front because I want my attention to stay on a flat plane right here, right on this surface. Okay, so we're going to start at the ends again, really saturate that well, and then start to kind of work our way up and feather that color up, or I'm sorry, that lightener up.
And this is nice too, because you're not working with a board where you have to worry about keeping the back clean, because you're also working to saturate those ends through on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if we were going, now let's say if I was doing this dry, I may not saturate quite as much here, and I probably would do like what Angela was saying. I would go with a board and work more just kind of getting that surface done really well versus trying to get that penetration and the saturation with the lightener. Excuse me. And the reason for that is because when it's dry, it ends up being a lot spottier. That water, I'm telling you, it really softens that lightener in perfectly.
It's not Corona. What is the formula for the color after you finish lightening? That will be shared as well, and Ricardo has a little fun twist at the end of class today, so stay tuned for that, and you might be able to help him pick what tone he does.
Yeah. So this is such a kind of a simple but fun technique to do, and what I love is that because it's working in the brunette family, right? So if you're when talking about brunettes, just as a whole, right? I know that everyone thinks that blonde is your moneymaker, but brunettes kind of rule the world. It's the second, well, technically, if you're considering black and brown with the hair colors, those are the 2 most common hair colors on the planet, right? So the majority of our clients are going to be natural brunettes. We have to work with that, right? So find ways to kind of have a little bit of fun with them, you know, like change the tones out, change your placement up a little bit. But I find so many people going this low maintenance approach. They want something that's going to last them for months at a time versus weeks at a time, like, you know, we used to do. And I think that that's so important to make sure that we are accommodating our clients in that way. Is that okay on the lighting there?
That's much better.
Awesome.
Michelle asks, did you spray with the water bottle or wet down before you started the bowl?
A little bit of both, actually. So she was sprayed down, and she was sprayed down at the bowl, and sprayed her down with the water bottle also. So here you can see, you know, just kind of doing what I was saying before, using a clean surface, a clean finger to just soften that in. And you can see the transition already, right? Dark to seeing a little bit of that product, and then more of the product and more of the product through the ends. And look at our first section. You can already see how that's starting to lift.
And there's no heat being used either, which is a really good point too.
Right? So look, you see how that's just like perfectly blurred and blended in? That's what we want to see.
So you're using your brush, you're using your finger.
Use all the tools at your disposal. Yeah. Your most important tools.
And have a towel on hand, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so how does everyone feel so far about this technique? Is this something that you think you'll be able to use in the salon? Is this simple enough or quick enough that you think it's going to help to make a difference when you're in the salon trying to execute this yourselves? Would love to know what you guys think.
We're getting lots of hearts and lots of thumbs up, so that
Awesome.
is a yes. Erica says she loves it. And a couple other people. Julian, what developer is Ricardo using? He is on the mannequin, he's using 40. In an in-person situation, you would want to use, or excuse me, 30. You would want to use 20 or less. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So with a person, I wouldn't go higher than 20 really. Unless you were wetting it down, then maybe 30 is okay. But on a mannequin, it's so hard to get any lift. So I'm using 30 on this one.
And to confirm, this is Blonde Life Cream Lightener.
Yes. So again, if you haven't seen it before, that's it right there.
And some great points of the cream lightener would include.
So I like to tell people the reason why I use cream lightener versus a powder in this case is it's great in the sense that it's got these extra conditioning properties to it, right? They have these extra essential oils, and the consistency is so much better for me personally when I'm doing this type of balayage work, that I'm able to really just breeze right through this. You know, it makes it a lot faster. And as a colorist who is not known for his speed, this definitely helps me out a lot. You know, and I've actually found myself in doing this able to work a lot faster overall. It's developed my skill set to a point where pretty soon I'm gonna lose my joke of saying how slow I am, like, because I'm actually getting pretty quick with this stuff.
He is, honestly. A couple questions coming in. Kistia asks, would you add bonder with this type of bleach? Great question.
Okay, so I actually already put a bonding agent on here before I started, so I'm not sure if you got to catch the very beginning of the live, but I talked about using Defy Damage, which is what Angela's holding up right there in front of the camera. That is the last bonding agent you'll ever want to try, because it's hands down the best one that you can use. It's a bond builder, strengthener, and protector all in one, right? So it's not just, doesn't just do one thing, it does them all, and it does them all at a level that if you haven't tried it before, you're going to find that it's the best that you've ever tried in regards to a bond protector or bond builder.
And Teresa, Blonde Life Cream Lightener provides up to 9 levels of lift.
Yes. So just like our Blonde Life Powder Lightener, the Blonde Life Cream Lightener also 9+ levels of lift. So you'll get that with both of them, whether you're using the blue powder lightener or our whiter based cream lightener.
A question coming in from Lisa. She asks, does it take any special shampooing to remove the oils in the lightener?
No, so that is, oh, man, thank you so much for bringing that up, Lisa, because I know that some of you might, especially if you have experience using a cream lightener, might hear those words cream lightener and cringe a little bit, right? Because you've had some traumatic experiences when trying to remove that lightener from the hair. Blonde Life Cream Lightener washes out so easily and so clean that you do not need to use anything else. I just use Defy Damage shampoo, and then I follow that up with Pro Series 2, and I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. But that's the last thing that you need in order to complete the bond protecting and building service, right? So you start first with Defy Damage Pro Series 1 spray, which another point too, y'all, is it's an aerosol, which makes it so easy to apply, so quick and efficient. But the other point that's great about it too is it doesn't change your formulation. So you know how a lot of times you have to adjust what your formula is? Well, with Defy Damage, you don't. And what's great about that too is it will actually help for your color to deposit more evenly and your lightener to create more lift, right? So those are really important things when we're talking about using Defy Damage. And this, just so you can see, this is the Pro Series 2 that you would use after the shampooing and after toning.
Awesome. Hope that answers that question. Natalie asks, is the cream lightener one-to-one with developer? She's not used cream before.
All right, so again, another great question, and I actually talked a little bit about it before when I was saying, I'm just going to hold on here for a second, because I feel like I'm getting a little dark. It's overcast outside.
Yeah, Florida.
So maybe we want to move over here. Perfect. So I formulate depending on what look what I did. Depending on what I'm using it for. So because I am using this for more of like that wet style balayage, I formulate 1 to 1.5. That's my personal preference. If I was going to use it on dry, as a dry balayage lightener, then I would probably go more 1 to 1.
All right, next question. Well, comment comes from Maureen. She says she loves this technique. She has a balayage to do tonight, and she is going to do this.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Wendy's with us. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. And I'm sorry, I missed the name. Did you say it was called Lean?
Maureen.
Maureen. Okay. If you do that, I would love if you would send me send us the finished result afterwards and let me know how it goes. You can feel free to send it to me in a DM on Instagram or even tag me in the post. We love to see that. We'd love to see how it comes out.
And Teresa comments that she's always afraid of cream lighteners and clay lighteners that they won't lift as high as powder. So this is to give you a little insight how we're lifting.
Not the case with Blonde Life Cream Lightener. nine levels. 9 levels.
Up to. And you can control that like Ricardo is sharing in this technique because you don't necessarily always want to lift 9 levels.
Yeah, so a couple of things too. Look, y'all, application's done.
Can we give Ricardo some applause? Because
I did that whole
this
thing
is a
in
miracle.
15-20 minutes.
He's getting so good at finishing.
And so much stopping and talking. I can't even, I don't even know who I am right
This is really good.
But a couple important notes when we're talking about this, right? First is because of the way that the sections stagger, I'm okay with just resting this on top of the previous because it actually doesn't connect. Like it's not actually laying on top of it. It's actually not even touching at the base because there's so much hair underneath here. It's actually pushing this out a little bit. So when this falls, I don't have to worry about any transfer going through to the previous section. Now, if you were taking smaller sections, well, look what I did. If you're taking smaller sections, I highly recommend using some kind of a divider in between. So in this case, like I have my balayage clear film that I used on the previous side. That also acts as a little bit of an insulation, so it helps it to process a little bit more evenly as well. But this is great also if you wanted to just put it in a foil. Another great thing is the Joico Artistry foils, especially if the hair's a little bit longer. You can use that and just, you can even rest a whole panel inside of one, or even in a couple of them. You can do that, like take a whole section and just they're huge foils, like I can't even, big, right? So those are great too, because the reason that I make that point is that because of the consistency of cream lightener, you can see how this consistency is. If I were to touch this anywhere, it leaves a mark right away. And it's not the kind that you can easily wipe off and it disappears. Like that lightener really goes to work immediately. So it's very easy to create spots in the hair if you're not using something as a barrier. In this case, my barrier is the fact that I'm using such large sections that it doesn't give it an opportunity to touch onto the brunette spots that are going to create any kind of spotting, right?
Can we really quick just show the after results?
Yeah, I was actually
we'll also be sharing the afters on Instagram, on Joico's Instagram and Ricardo's Instagram, which is at Stylist Ricardo Santiago. Yes. So look out for that and some additional behind the scenes stuff. We do have a couple questions, but what were you going to say?
Well, I wanted to ask who wants to know what the formula is now.
Oh.
And if anyone can guess, if anyone guesses this formula, I'll give you 2 minutes. If anyone can guess what I put on here, I'll personally send you something myself.
Oh boy.
But
With Ricardo, nothing's ever simple, so just bear with that. He's like a color nerd, which is not a bad thing. We're getting lots of applauses. Love the technique.
Awesome.
There is a couple questions in there that I will try to go back to if I missed. Several people are saying, wow, that was fast. And the impact of the result is amazing. Let's see. I don't have any answers coming in just yet, so let's give them. Somebody said copper pigment. Okay, while we wait for a few more answers to come in, there's some specifics. Somebody asked, would you recommend using HKP over dampening the hair?
You know, you can absolutely do that. HKP, so if, for those who don't know, HKP is this lovely treatment here. It's a liquid protein that Joico has, and this is actually part of the new staging. How pretty is it? But this is great to also help to moisten the hair, and at the same time it's balancing porosity because it's filling in with those proteins as well. So this is also a great option. I wouldn't go with anything that's like a liquid, like a liquid conditioning base, just because that would probably slow down the developer even more, right?
And forgive me that I didn't see the name on who asked that. I saw Dan answered it. Okay, so here's some guesses on the formula. Emma guesses 9NB and 6RR.
Good guess.
It's not exact.
Not quite, but it's a really good guess.
Christina says 9V and 8G. Cameron.
Also a good guess.
Okay, we're headed in the right direction. 9V and 8RR from Cameron.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll take two more. So Lisa says V8 and Lynn says 6NRV. So the real...
Lisa's after my heart. She went with the chrome. I love that. So here is my actual formulation. So my front runners, right? So I think it was Cameron that you said actually got most of it right. So it's equal parts 9V and 8RR. But I also added in a cap of 5RRV and a cap of 4NV. The reason that I did that is because of the level of lift that I was able to achieve. I need a little bit more depth than just 9V and 8RR. So I added in these two as well, just to kind of bring it down and anchor it down a little bit for these kind of darker spots right here. Because if I went just with the 9V and 8RR, I'd probably have this exact tone through here, but this transition area would probably be sitting a little bit more on that orange side, which we were enough of that violet and red violet in there that over the orange, it turns it more of a pink hue.
And just to confirm, what mannequin?
So in this transition area, when I'm saying that, I'm referencing these higher panels right here. And this, where I kind of softened the pressure that I'm using to saturate. Those transition areas, I would say lifted to a 7. Whereas through the ends, we lifted to a pretty good 8, a solid 8 and 9 in some spots. Now, this is just something, if you haven't already, take a screenshot. This is some of my personal favorite formulations based on the level. So if you see this here, 4-5 base, that means if your client's at level 4-5 and you lift to a 6-7 through the ends, this is a great formula. I would do mostly 6NV and just a cap of 5RRV. If your base is a 5-6, then and you lift to a 7-8, then here's a great formulation as well, 7V and 8RR. And then if you're a 6-7 base, then and you lift to an 8-9, then this would be a great formulation. Now I actually combined a little bit of both of these in order to create, because I kind of lived between that 6-7 and I lifted between 7 and 9. So in that I kind of combine all of them. So great thing to kind of take a snapshot of there.
And if you guys missed that and you need any of the information from class today or any of the visuals, just send us a DM on Instagram at Stylist Ricardo Santiago and we'll send that over to you.
Yep, but that's it. That's our entire class. We've actually run through the entire hour. I'm really grateful for all of you to have spent your Tuesday afternoon here with us. If you have questions, like Angela said, please send a message. We would love to connect with you. And I am so grateful for all of you. I hope you enjoyed the technique. Just, have a great rest of your week and enjoy.